This tutorial demonstrates the follow-up analysis in the case of an observable interaction in a two-way ANOVA in SPSS. I have already shown how to conduct and interpret the two-way ANOVA itself in the linked video. Here, the focus is specifically on examining which factor combinations cause differences when an interaction is observed. Additionally, we will consider whether conclusions can be drawn beyond the interaction itself. Let's start with the case of an observable interaction, using the fictional example of gender and experience. I will discuss the so-called main effects when an interaction is present later in the video. See the timestamps for that section. To analyze only the interaction initially, we calculate estimated marginal means, which are pairwise comparisons for all combinations of the interaction effect levels. In other words, we examine gender differences at each experience level and experience differences within each gender. The more precisely potential differences have been derived beforehand, the easier the interpretation will be. The estimated marginal means had to be requested in advance. Here is a reminder of where to find that setting. Additionally, a profile plot is helpful, and we will return to that later. It was requested through this option. The estimated marginal means can be found directly below the table for tests of between subjects effects. It is necessary to scroll down until you find the interaction effect, rather than just the individual main effects. I scrolled past 1, gender, and 2, experience, until I reach 3, gender times experience. Here we see gender differences at each experience level, showing whether there are differences between men and women at experience levels 1, 2, 3, or 4. The structure of the table is always symmetrical, meaning there are duplicate entries. The significance values corrected for alpha error inflation using Bonferroni adjustment are the key figures to consider. In this example, sufficiently small p-values indicate differences in mean income between men and women at experience levels 1, 2, and 4. I deliberately avoid the term significant and instead refer to sufficiently small p-values, because context matters more than an arbitrarily set alpha threshold. For further reading, I highly recommend the 2019 article by Wasserstein et al., which provides an excellent summary of why p smaller 0.05 is so problematic. The mean differences column provides insight into the magnitude of these differences. For example, in the first row, I minus j represents the mean difference between men and women, which is 448. This means that in the dataset, men at experience level 1 have an average income that is 448 higher than women's. The other differences can be interpreted in the same way. If we now want to check whether there are differences between experience levels within each gender, we scroll further down to another table that follows the same logic. Based on sufficiently small p-values, men show differences in mean income between experience levels 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 4, and 2 and 4. For women, differences could be observed between experience levels 1 and 3, 1 and 4, 2 and 3, and 2 and 4. Additionally, profile plots can be examined. However, they should not be seen as a substitute for the formal tests using estimated marginal means. Instead, they serve as a visual aid for understanding the data when navigating through tables becomes overwhelming. Finally, let's briefly discuss the main effects when an interaction is present. The general rule is, if an interaction exists, it is of primary interest. However, there may still be interpretable main effects. These can be interpreted globally, at least to some extent, when the interaction is either ordinal or hybrid. I have linked a more detailed video on interaction types, so I will only cover the basics here. If a factor has the same directional effect at all levels of the other factor, then its effect can be interpreted globally. This is easiest to assess visually. In this example, we observe that experience increases income regardless of gender. In other words, the functions point in the same direction. The effect of experience is consistently positive across all levels of the other factor, i.e. for both genders. Similarly, we see that men consistently earn more than women at every experience level. Graphically, this is visible because all functions point in the same direction. If this were not the case, if, for example, at experience level 4, the function moved in the opposite direction, then a general statement, like the one I just made, could not be made due to this exception. To summarize, if the function points in the same direction, the main effect can be interpreted globally. However, a sufficiently small p-value in the tests of between subjects effects table is still required for this interpretation. Since the focus has been on the estimated marginal means of the interaction, we should also calculate effect sizes for them. The following video shows you how to do that.